The Lamb looks like one of the simplest poems William Blake ever wrote. A child looks at a lamb and asks, "Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee?" The answer seems obvious. God created the lamb. But there is a problem hidden inside that simple answer. The child believes that he can understand the Creator by looking at creation. The lamb is gentle, vulnerable, and beautiful. Therefore, God, who created it, must also be gentle and loving. That reasoning works perfectly while the child is looking at the lamb. But what happens when Blake replaces the lamb with the tiger? Keep that problem in mind because it changes the way we read the entire poem. So let's start with Innocence. The Lamb was published in Songs of Innocence in 1789. Later, Blake would bring Songs of Innocence together with Songs of Experience, describing them as the two contrary states of the human soul. This distinction is essential. Innocence should not simply be understood as childhood, just as experience does not simply mean adulthood. They are different states of perception, different ways of seeing and interpreting reality. And in the Lamb, everything we see is filtered through innocence. The setting is pastoral. The lamb feeds beside the stream and over the meadow. Blake mentioned valleys, soft wool, tender voice. His illustration in the book reinforces the same impression. The child and the animal occupy a protected and natural environment. There is no visible threat. For the child, the world appears coherent and benevolent, and his idea of God grows naturally out of that experience. The Creator gave the lamb life. He provided its food. He gave it soft wool and a voice that makes the valleys rejoice. The child looks at these signs of care and recognizes the same qualities in their Creator. This is the logic of innocence. Then we have another point, the question and answer structure. The structure of the poem is extremely easy to remember. There are two stanzas, each consisting of 10 lines. The first stanza asks, the second stanza answers. The poem begins, "Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee?" The same lines return at the end of the first stanza. So the question frames everything that comes between them. But notice what the child does before answering in the second stanza. He observes. He looks at the lamb and describes what the unknown Creator has given it: life, food, clothing, voice. This movement is important because Blake takes us from the visible to the invisible. The child can see the creature, but he cannot see the Creator. So he uses creation as evidence from which he can understand God. Another important point is the music. We have to listen to the poem. Before looking at the child's answer, we need to listen to Blake's language. "Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee?" The repetition is immediately noticeable, and so is the rhythm. The poem has the musical quality of a children's song or nursery rhyme. That effect is particularly produced by its meter. In English poetry, meter is based mainly on pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. These small rhythmic units are called feet. The most familiar English foot is probably the iamb. An iamb moves from an unstressed syllable to a stressed one. For example, the dumb. Think of believe. A trochee reverses the pattern. Dum da. For example, table. Or little, like in little lamb who made thee. Now listen to Blake. Little lamb who made thee. That's the moving, a strong falling movement. The basic rhythm of the lamb is strongly trochaic, although Blake does not follow it mechanically. He varies the rhythm, sometimes introducing iambic movements and sometimes allowing a strong stress to close the line, like in rejoice, or all the gifts that God gave to the Lamb. These are strongly stressed in the poem. And this is much more important than learning a complicated scansion by heart. Listen to what the meter does. The repeated falling movement is easy to reproduce and easy to remember. Together with rhyme and repetition, it gives the poem the simplicity of a song spoken by a child. The form sounds like innocence. And then, who made the lamb? The second stanza changes the direction of the poem. The child, the speaker, maybe the poet, announces, "Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee." He's no longer asking. He knows the answer, and the answer is Christ. Blake develops it through a series of connections. For he calls himself a lamb, he is meek and he is mild, he became a little child, I a child, and thou a lamb, we are called by his name. These lines give us the symbolic center of the poem. Christ is traditionally identified as the Lamb of God. Through the incarnation, Christ also became a child. The speaker is a child, and the creature standing before him is a lamb. Blake can therefore connect all three figures: Christ, child, lamb. When the three identities in this way almost overlap. Christ shares the gentleness of the lamb and the innocence of the child, and then the Lamb of God. There is, however, something contained in the Christian image of the Lamb that the child does not explore. The Christian reader knows that the symbol carries suffering and death, as well as gentleness and innocence, because the Lamb of Christ is a symbol of sacrifice. But this does not mean that Blake is secretly turning the lamb into a dark poem, because the child does not follow the image in that direction. There is no fear in the child's voice, and suffering never enters in the pastoral landscape. Its absence tells us something about innocence. The child perceives harmony, love, and divine protection because those are the aspects of existence available to him at this moment. His vision has genuine value, but it is not complete. So, what is the real problem with the lamb? We can now return to the problem with which we began. The child's argument can be reconstructed quite easily. The lamb is gentle, God created the lamb, therefore the creator must be gentle and loving. Within the world of this poem, the conclusion feels perfectly natural. But the conclusion depends upon evidence. The child happens to be looking at a lamb in a peaceful landscape. Imagine that the evidence changed. Elsewhere in Songs of Innocence, Blake gives us the chimney sweeper, another child, but one sold into dangerous labor and surrounded by suffering. What would that child's life tell us about the Creator? And then there is the question Blake will eventually make explicit. Did he who made the lamb make thee? The line comes from the tiger. The same God who created the lamb also created an animal of extraordinary physical power, capable of violence and destruction. Suddenly, the child's method becomes much more difficult to apply. Blake does not tell us that the vision of the lamb was false, but that it was limited. And that distinction matters. Innocence sees something true about creation, but it has not yet encountered enough of the creation to understand its contradictions. Experience will force those contradictions into view. So, in conclusion, if you are studying the lamb for an examination, you have to remember 4 words. These are innocence, sound, Christ, and creation. Innocence explains the protected pastoral world and the child's way of seeing it. Sound reminds us of repetition, musicality, and the strongly trochaic movement that gives the poem its nursery rhyme quality. Christ connects the speaker and the animal through the Lamb of God and the Incarnation, and creation gives us the intellectual problem underlying the poem. The child looks at the gentle creature and discovers a gentle creator. Blake will now take exactly the same method of reasoning and test it against something completely different. We leave the stream, the meadow, and the tender voice behind, and we enter the forests of the night. And there something is burning, and that something is the tiger.